Hello everyone, my name is Maddy Caroscio and I will be discussing the pros and cons of online textbooks. The reason I wanted to discuss this topic was because online textbooks are becoming more and more popular, and I wanted to research and see which one has more pros compared to cons and which one is actually better. So going into the paper, I'm going to start with the pros of traditional textbooks. So many stores sell the textbooks nowadays and they're easily accessible. When searching for a textbook, most stores will sell them new, which is at a higher cost as compared to renting them or using them or getting a used textbook, which is a lower cost. When buying a traditional textbook, it will either come as a hardback book or paper book copy, which is just loose leaf paper that you would have to put in a binder to keep. These books are available mostly in bookstores, libraries, or on Amazon, so any online store. Even though traditional hardback textbooks may be bulky, students are able to sell them back and make money from that, or lend them to others as their friends to just help them out and get the book faster. So into the cons of traditional textbooks. They can take up a lot of extra space and storage, and they might be heavier to carry around everywhere. A vast majority of the textbooks are going to be heavy and bulky, and not many textbooks come small nowadays. Traditional textbooks, especially for college students who buy them themselves, can run at a very high price, and they may have trouble finding them, especially if it's a larger class where everyone needs this book and there's only one place to get it. It might sell out pretty fast. Purchasing a used book may be cheaper, but it can also be in a worse condition and have either writing or highlighting marks in it, or it just might be torn up a little bit. It is also said that in the traditional textbooks, it's harder to search for things and find certain information as compared to like an online textbook where you could just search it right on the web. So overall, the traditional textbook does have more pros as compared to the cons. Moving into the pros and cons of online textbooks. The first ebook was actually created and discovered in 1971 and was founded by Project Gutenberg. Online textbooks seem to have slightly more cons than traditional textbooks, but it wasn't a huge ratio. When ordering ebooks, there is no wait for shipping, which is better than a traditional textbook, and they're accessible the day of purchase since you have that right in your hands. They will never go out of stock since teachers and students access them on their own device rather than borrowing, renting, or purchasing a book from a different company. Typically, instead of receiving a textbook, students will receive an access code to retrieve access to that book on whatever device they may be using. Most books are easy to read on either a tablet, computer, smartphone, e-reader, any type of device. Students and teachers will still be able to highlight and make notes on the textbook, so on whatever device they may be using, they can still take notes, bookmark pages, do all the same things you could do in a traditional hardback textbook. Online textbooks are friendly to the environment since they are paperless and can be easily downloaded as long as there is an internet connection. So that's one of the cons, is that if there wasn't an internet connection, then you wouldn't have access to the book, or you'd have to wait until you got somewhere where there was the connection. So that moves into the cons. So in order to access the ebook, a student or teacher must have some device to access it on, as well as that internet connection. And typically the access codes only last for that one semester, that year, and they typically are not renewable or able to be sold back as if traditional textbooks are, where if you rented it, you could return it, or if you did buy it, you could try and get some money back depending on how old or what brand the textbook was. So compared to traditional textbooks, the website that I found all this research on shows that there are more pros and one less con for online textbooks, but they are overall the same amount of pros and cons compared between online and traditional textbooks. Moving into the cost comparison, online textbooks typically run a lot less than traditional hardback textbooks do. Although online textbooks may be cheaper and seem as a better purchase, if you don't have that device, the smartphone, tablet, laptop, PC, then it will be more costly because you will have to purchase that device to view the online textbook on. So according to Rachel Phelps from classroom.com, paper textbooks, which can be purchased new or used and shared between classmates, students, teachers, ebooks can be purchased or rented through an online seller and then downloaded immediately to a digital device or computer. So she compares and contrasts them and discusses many of the positives and negatives, as I mentioned earlier. I just wanted to throw her quote in there. So then she also goes in to discuss the cost comparison. So with online textbooks, a majority of the cost does come from purchasing that device, as I mentioned earlier, rather than a textbook where it comes directly from buying and purchasing that textbook. So currently the price of an updated human anatomy textbook, which is mentioned right around here, is listed around $150 for a brand new book, and between $50 and around $100 that cost is to rent a book, and then it's close to $100 for the online book edition. So in this case, it may be cheaper to rent a traditional textbook rather than purchase that online textbook. So the cost of all textbooks will change not only from whether it's hardback or online, but also from the textbook company, how old the book edition is, what course it's for, if it has been updated recently or not. Moving down, online textbooks may not always be the better option, as I mentioned around here. Although having online textbooks creates the paperless environment and maybe less of a hassle to carry around all those textbooks if you were to have to purchase more than one or two, especially if they're bulky, saving money and having the ability to rent textbooks can be a much better idea rather than spending that maybe extra 20 to however much amount to get just the online textbook. So the health issues, this was something new to me. I wouldn't have thought that textbooks would create some eye strain or a health issue, but some studies did show that online textbooks and traditional hardback textbooks create eye strain. So for CVS is a computer vision syndrome, and this is caused from looking at a computer monitor without giving your eyes a break or just like looking at the screen for a really long time. So CVS is mainly just caused from PCs rather than the new devices today, such as tablets, laptops, and smartphones, which they now have clearer screens, which is why we can look at them for a longer period and not have eye strain or have caused health issues. The main difference about traditional textbooks causing eye strain is for having the correct lighting. Ebooks come with the backlighting and lighting of their own, which is controlled by the brightness level on any device. Traditional textbooks obviously don't have that, so you have to create your own light, whether it's turning on a light in the house, going outside, just depending on what time of day it is and where you are reading at. So overall, which textbook might be better? The health category part of it does not influence these results. It's mainly just your personal preference. So if you have lower eyesight, experts actually say that you would be better off with a digital device, which is supported by researchers at Robert Wood Johnson Medical School reported a study of 100 participants who read passages on three different mediums, so the traditional textbook, a Kindle, and an iPad, and their words per minute were each calculated and then compared, and the results consisted of those who had poor eyesight read better actually on a backlit screen such as the iPad or Kindle, whereas people with good eyesight preferred the traditional hard textbook and tended to read better and faster. So overall, it's just which you would prefer, and maybe depending on your eyesight, which would be better for you. I then conducted surveys of my own where I asked the students in this class, so my peers, and then teachers from a school that my mom works at. I was able to get a connection and email a survey out to them to see their thoughts and their end of this. So when I surveyed the classmates, I asked 3 questions. The first question was, which textbook do they prefer? And a vast majority said that they prefer the traditional hardback textbook, which I do as well. The next question I asked was, if you chose the traditional textbook, do you typically get them new or used? Being college students, new textbooks are usually really high priced, so it's easier just to rent a textbook and get that used textbook, which a lot of people voted for. Then, if you chose online, what type of device do you view it on? So I asked if you viewed it on a smartphone, laptop, PC, or tablet, and no one actually chose tablet as a device, but one person chose smartphone. The rest was mainly on a laptop, and then some were on a PC. Lastly, I asked the teachers 4 questions, and I asked them which one do they personally prefer to use in their classroom, and as my classmates said, they prefer the traditional textbook over the online, even though they are moving into having online textbooks throughout all schools. I then asked, which would they rather have their students use? And mainly all teachers chose the traditional, but some said online because they may have access to laptops or tablets in their room to be able to use the online textbook. The third question I asked was, if they have traditional textbooks, was it that they had a class set only, the students have their own copy, they had both of those, or the class didn't need a textbook? And I was shocked at the amount of classes that didn't actually use a textbook. I know one teacher came up to me and was like, I'm not taking this survey because I don't use a textbook. And it was a science teacher, so it was very shocking. But then the rest of them said that they either had mainly a class set or they had both a class set and the students had their own set. The last part of the survey was if they used online textbooks. Was it a bring your own device setup classroom? Class set only devices? Did they have both bring your own device and classroom set? Or again, did they not use a textbook? So most teachers responded with they have a class set of devices, whether that being iPads, PCs, or laptops in the room, or students brought their own device, which when I visited a school, they typically had a class set of PCs, laptops, or iPads in there, and some students would use their phones if they were playing a Kahoot game, for example. So my thoughts and my end conclusion was that overall it's depending on what you would prefer to use yourself and maybe what you would prefer to use in a classroom. So my personal thoughts becoming a teacher is I would send out a survey that if I was a new teacher and I had to pick out a textbook for my classroom, I would try to get the students' reactions or students' thoughts on textbooks, whether they do like the online textbook or the hardback textbook. It just depends on what they prefer and what the school has available and accessible to us as teachers. And then it also just depends on like I said, what type of device or what type of textbook you would like. What your lighting conditions would be is something to keep in mind, where you will be reading, the level of vision you're at. As they mentioned, the lower visions rather would have the online textbook compared to people with better vision. and then also the budget, since textbooks tend to be at a higher cost. And lastly, there was not much more about the eye strain and health conditions, so there wasn't a huge debate about that and whether online textbooks were actually bad for your eyesight or not. So that is all. These are my works cited. Thank you for watching.